link with them for them to join the Zoom meeting, but I think you can start in the meantime.
Fantastic. Well, welcome everybody, and thank you so much for joining me here on this urgent session. This is a mandating meeting for you, our members of the Confederation, so that we are in a position to actually provide feedback to the Department of Trade and Industry of Employment and Labor. Sorry, we're doing so many of the feedback sessions. I have to keep track of the department. To the Department of Employment and Labor on the proposed labor law amendments, which were gazetted recently for comment, and also to Business Unity South Africa, who can then give our input into the NEDLAC process for what it's worth. And I will talk a little bit about the for what it's worth in a second, because I am very upset, I would say, with how this process has in fact evolved at NEDLAC. Just to tell you, colleagues, that I attended a session, and Kate, I think you were there when we were getting, I think it was at the Cheetah last year, where we were getting feedback from the Department of Labor and the representative of government at NEDLAC, who basically said the following, and Kate, you know, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but he basically said, look, NEDLAC, what the employers put out at NEDLAC is not really important for what we eventually decide as government. In other words, that NEDLAC has been relegated not even to a consultation environment, but simply to an information sharing environment, and that government and essentially government working together with the trade unions are basically going to do whatever they want to do at the end of the day. So I think that as business, we have to take it upon ourselves to make sure that there is sufficient feedback, but we also have to ensure that within the context of NEDLAC, that the business representatives at NEDLAC do not acquiesce every time they go into negotiations at NEDLAC, but that in fact they stand their ground for the business community. Kate, I don't know how you feel about that.
Yes, I agree with you. Yes, I think it was last year, not this year.
Yeah, last year.
And yeah, I think it's something that we just have to comply on. And yeah, let's see, just continue with the presentation. Let me be honest, with all these things that are changing now and then, I don't know moving forward how are we gonna do it.
All right. Thank you so much. And thanks for that input, Kate. Right. So colleagues, so I have in front of me just who we are when we provide feedback. So we're providing feedback as the Confederation of Coatings, which includes SAPMA. It includes the Surface Coating Employer Association. It includes the South African Retail Paint and Hardware Association, and it includes the Waterproofing Trade Association of South Africa. And as you know, we represent manufacturers, we represent distributors, retailers, contractors, transporters, and specialist applicators. In terms of the observations we're making in a feedback document, and I'm sure you've all seen the feedback document by now, but in terms of our observations, well, many of the businesses represented by the Confederation have been operating for decades, and we employ skilled workers whose livelihoods depend on the continued sustainability of these businesses. Our employer associations recognize the policy objectives which underpin the Employment Amendment Bill, to strengthen worker protection, to improve enforcement certainty, to align labor legislation. However, taken together, the changes which are being proposed by the Department of Employment and Labor materially alter the cost, the enforcement, and the risk environment for employers across all sectors. And we say this in our paper. The proposed amendments materially increase the cost, the administrative complexity, and the enforcement exposure associated with employing people in South Africa. For small and medium-sized businesses, this additional burden is not sustainable It's not justified in the current economic environment. I'll just give you one practical example, and I'll deal with this in detail a little later. But for example, do you know that, and in fact, the Director General who represents government at NEDLAC said this at that meeting we attended last year. He said, look, we've made a decision. We're not going back on this decision. We are doubling the retrenchment benefit. We are moving the basic retrenchment benefit from 1 week to 2 years for every completed year of service. So we're doubling the cost of retrenchment, 100% increase in the cost of retrenchment. We're not interested in what business has to say about that. This is exactly what the Director General said at a public meeting. We are not interested in what business has to say about the fact that we are doubling the cost of retrenchment pay. And with that comes all the other considerations, because obviously it'll be an increase in pension fund benefits and all the other benefits included in that package that will have to be offered to employees. So government is of the view that working together with Labour, they will push through and they will bully business into doubling the cost of retrenchment. No scope for engagement, no scope for discussion. From a high-level submission point of view, we submit that the bill should be assessed against the following fundamental principles. Number one, employers oppose all amendments that increase statutory labor costs. Employers oppose all amendments that create new compliance categories or documentation burdens. What is inherent in these changes is the amount of bureaucracy, the amount of compliance documentation that is going to be required if these amendments go through as is, that the business negotiators at NEDLAC, specifically large business negotiators at NEDLAC, are unconcerned about, because they've not expressed that as a concern at NEDLAC. Why? Because the very large businesses which are around the table, the Sasol's, the Escoms of this world, have hundreds of people who can handle that bureaucracy. But in small to medium-sized businesses that have not been at the NEDLAC table, that have not been allowed to express the concerns of small and medium-sized businesses, it is a massive mountain to climb in terms of bureaucracy and additional documentation compliance. Employers oppose all amendments that widen litigation and enforcement exposure without first reducing duplication across the existing labor law framework. Employers support only amendments that simplify, consolidate, or reduce compliance obligations. And there are one or two, and I'll talk about those in a minute. And where an amendment cannot be demonstrated to reduce the regulatory or administrative burden on employers, the amendments should be withdrawn. So those are our high-level submissions. We talk in our submission about the overburden compliance framework. Business in the coatings value chain, us, are already required to comply with the Labour Relations Act, the Basic Conditions of Employment Act, the Employment Equity Act, the National Minimum Wage Act, unemployment insurance legislation, sectoral bargaining council engagements. Those of you in the SCA will know about that. Pension and provident fund rules, health and safety obligations, and many other workplace policy requirements. Compliance within this framework already requires significant admin effort, professional advisory costs, and internal management time. And the introduction of further compliance layers will not improve labor standards. It will instead divert scarce resources away from productive activity and employment creation. So we're very specific about making this point in our feedback. As far as increased costs are concerned, the most immediate concern is the cumulative financial impact created by the amendments. The increase in statutory severance pay from 1 week to 2 weeks remuneration represents a significant escalation in retrenchment costs. And while the transitional limits narrow this to only forward-looking rather than backwards-looking, employers with long service workforces will face materially higher future liabilities. 100% increase in those liabilities. And when combined with strengthened minimum wage enforcement, escalated fines, and the treatment of benefit fund non-payment as equivalent to wage non-payment, the bill embeds a structurally higher cost base into employment decisions. For labor-intensive sectors, this increases the likelihood that employers delay hiring, accelerate automation, restructure towards non-growth, non-employment growth models. And we therefore, as the Confederation, oppose amendments that increase statutory employment costs. In particular, the proposal to increase severance pay from 1 week to 2 weeks of remuneration per completed year of service. This raises the cost of retrenchment, the cost of restructuring, and the cost of business rescue. The amendment will make employers more cautious about hiring permanent staff and will increase the financial risk associated with economic downturns. I just want to go back to that point, because practically, as employers, you have this decision to make now. Until these amendments become law, you have 1 week for every year of service as your consideration. You also know that the likelihood is going to be that business is not going to be heard, and therefore the 2 weeks is going to be pushed through. So between now and when the law changes, this is your strategic decision. Do I implement my restructuring, my operational changes now? Do I engage in Section 189 immediately now, before I know that I'm going to have 100% increase in the cost of doing that once this stuff becomes law? And it's a significant consideration. I just want to pause there and ask, are there any comments or observations? Because this is a very, very important point. And this is a mandating session from you. So I do want to know, are there any considerations about what I've just said? That between now and when this becomes law, there will be a gap of 100% additional increase in the cost of retrenchment. Any thoughts or concerns that you wish to raise in this regard? Anybody wish to say something? All right, let's move on, but please feel free to interject and just unmute your microphone and say, sorry? Did someone say something? All right, just moving forward then. So one of the things we say is that there is, what is being proposed in this labor law amendment is enforcement overreach. And what do we mean by this? Well, number one, the bill fundamentally reshapes enforcement dynamics. Labor inspections, now you will have seen over the last couple of days that Minister Meth, that's not methylated spirit, that's the Minister of Employment and Labor, Minister Meth, has said that they are going to devote billions of rands to employing 10,000 more labor inspectors to blitz the compliant, or rather to blitz the registered employer base in South Africa in all 9 provinces. 10,000 more of these animals are going to be knocking on your door to blitz your business and to look for anything you are doing which is considered to be non-compliant, because the Department of Employment and Labor are only going to be focusing on registered businesses, not illegal informal traders. So they are going to appoint 10,000 more inspectors. And this is the big change in this amendment. Those labor inspectors will be accompanied by trade union representatives to do those inspections. So in other words, when a labor inspector knocks on your door, they will be accompanied by a trade union official to inspect your workplaces. And this moves the notion of enforcement from technical compliance into adversarial processes with immediate evidentiary and reputational consequences to your business. This is a major overreach in terms of enforcement. It's not something that organized business sitting at NEDLAC has even raised as an issue. And yet it has major repercussions in your workplace. Because now, not only are you going to be answering to the Department of Employment and Labor, but you're going to have a trade union official sitting on the other side of the table, sitting right next to the Department of Employment and Labor, and inspecting, critically analyzing the way you do business. Now, that's an absolute overreach. And I hope you agree with me in this regard. If you disagree or have any observations, just unmute your microphone and let me know, please. But this is almost more dangerous than raising the cost of retrenchment by 100%. At the same time, the compliance order regime is tightened, objection periods are shortened, and arbitration pathways have been streamlined. So you will be pushed straight into arbitration. You won't be given the right to what we refer to as audit ultram partem, hear both sides of the story before making a decision. So the department will have fast-tracked the decision-making process that you're criminally negligent in your business if there is an area of non-compliance without giving you any kind of ordinary acceptable right of reply. So the practical effect is a shift from corrective compliance towards punishment, with reduced opportunity for you, the employer, to remedy your breaches before the department applies formal sanctions advised by the trade union person who was there to inspect your business with them. So we are concerned that this approach will penalize administrative errors and systems failure in your business in the same way as if you were deliberately non-compliant. Major problem as far as we're concerned. And while enforcement of existing law is important, expanding litigation exposure, the opportunity for you to be sued, the opportunity for there to be criminal judgments against your business and the directors of the business, without simplifying the underlying regulatory framework, increases legal risk for those of you who want to be compliant and who are, in the main part, compliant. Now, small businesses are even worse off than large businesses because small and medium businesses cannot absorb the legal and the administrative costs which are associated with frequent disputes, frequent referrals, and frequent arbitrations. So as a confederation, we submit that enforcement should focus on deliberate non-compliance rather than increasing the procedural burden on employers who are already attempting to comply within a very complex regulatory environment. Is there any comment about this?
Hi, Ever.
Yes, hello.
It's Tabo from Integrated Plus.
How's it, Tabo?
I'm good to out.
Fine, thank you. So what are your thoughts, sir?
My thought on this, Ivan, it's if they're going to do that, they must also consider that the small businesses, they have got a lot of hard and difficult a road path on doing business, as well as getting their compliance okay. Because for small businesses for small and medium businesses to have all the compliances correctly, it's cost them a lot. I'm not saying employers must not comply, must not be compliant on their business. We all need to be compliant. We all must comply. So as we are speaking right now, from the Department of Labor, from the Department of Employment and Labor, there's a huge crisis in the compliance side. A huge crisis, especially in COIDA, especially in COIDA, because most of the small businesses, when they apply for COIDA, they don't get COIDA on time. They don't get COIDA at a designated time frame that themselves, from the Employment and Labor and the Compensation Fund Commissioner, the time frame that they put into the business, that they say this process can take plus minus 21 working days. It's not true. It's not true. Most of the small businesses that are doing COIDA from their side, from Compensation Fund Office, which is part of Department of Employment and Labor, they are in a bad situation right at the moment. When you try to engage with them, they will tell you they've got a backlog. They will tell you that there's nobody who can help you on that. They will tell you a lot of stories. While it's there, they're enforcing compliance. If themselves from their side, they're not being able to produce what they say, what they are saying to employers, how us as employers going to be compliant?
I think that's such an important point, Tava, because what you're really saying is this, that whereas they are putting their focus on enforcement, they are not putting their focus on making sure that they have the capacity to service all the elements of where they're supposed to be servicing the business environment.
Exactly.
Thank you very much for that. I think that's critically important, and we have tried to make that point.
They can do that. Even the minister now, the Minister of Employment and Labor, Ms. Smith, can go and have a full 9 hours day in the Office of Compensation Fund Office and check the issuance and the processes of the letter of good standing from their office, their own office. She's going to behave with the system.
I am certain
Their system
she
is
knows
very bad.
exactly.
Very, very bad. Most of the companies that are thriving now, most of them, they are running from Compensation Fund and Employment Department of Labor to FAM. Because FAM, it's a better place that way. Most of the business, they get a letter of good standing. Remember, as an employer, if you are owning a business, then you are looking for opportunities outside and you don't have a letter of good standing. Other big businesses that they've got an opportunity, that they want to give you an opportunity. If you are not having the current updated letter of good standing, they're not going to give you an opportunity to participate in their business because it's a mandatory from the government. But when you go to government to look for such documentation to say, I'm here, I want to comply. Can you please do me this and this so that I can be compliant? You give me whatever any invoice, then I pay them so that my company can also on the page with the government. They will tell you a lot of stories. They will tell you a lot of processes. When you call to their receptionist, they will tell you this thing is being handled by unknown people. Who is unknown people in the government office?
Yeah. All right. The point is very well made, Tava. The point is exceptionally well made.
Like small contractors, especially in construction.
Yes.
In a whole construction environment, if you are owning business, you are compliant with CIPC, you are compliant with SARS, but you don't have a letter of good standing. You go to the Department of Labor and say, guys, can I have your COIDA, your letter of good standing? Then they will put your process. They will process your business in their system. But for them to issue the certificate to say this company has been registered with us, we are approving this. Here is the certificate for the approval. Is the original letter of good standing for this company to participate to get the business, so that it can also thrive and help to minimize the rate of unemployment in South Africa. It's difficult for them.
Thabo, thank you so much for that. I think that that's so important, and we will certainly look. We've already incorporated it into our feedback, but we will emphasize it a lot more. Is there anybody else who wants to make any points in this regard before I carry on? Okay, let me carry on then. So, dispute resolution, I mentioned a little earlier, but it's worthwhile re-mentioning. So the dispute volume and litigation exposure is going to increase because of the way these regulations have been rewritten. Expanded arbitration jurisdiction for benefit fund disputes, parental leave disputes, minimum wage disputes, and employment equity disputes channel more matters into expedited forums. In other words, those forums are going to be rushed, those arbitration activities are going to be rushed with binding outcomes, which, if not then complied with by employers, become criminal convictions. Sexual harassment disputes are explicitly widened in scope for referral, reducing jurisdictional filtering. So sexual harassment disputes are themselves going to increase dispute resolution volumes and litigation exposure for companies. And while access to justice is important, the cumulative effect is to compress response timelines. In other words, to give you less time to respond, less time to rectify, and to raise the litigation frequency, particularly for medium-sized employers without in-house legal capacity, for small businesses without in-house legal capacity. As far as compliance certification is concerned, governance, and I think this is a point that Thabo was in fact emphasizing, governance and compliance consolidation, it is a positive objective, particularly the introduction of employment equity compliance certification to reduce duplication across government processes. However, certification without clear administrative timelines and predictable criteria creates its own risk. And that's the problem with the way these things have been written. There are not clear administrative timelines. And there are no predictable criteria. Criteria you know are going to be applied. And because of that, there's a lot left up in the air. Employers require certainty that compliance efforts will translate into recognized status. In other words, I'm going to get my compliance certificate, especially where procurement, licensing, or incentive access is actually affected by the decisions of the employment and labor, but more importantly, of the trade union sitting on the other side of the table, now sitting in judgment of the way you do business. Historically, the systemic management of process by any government department in South Africa has failed this country. We've not seen a success in the Department of Labor, whether it's of COIDA or anything to do with health and safety generally, whether it's UIF. We've not seen efficiency, we've not seen good systems, and we've seen undermanned call centers so that employers never get responses. So in conclusion, the coating sector supports a labor relations framework that protects workers while enabling businesses to operate sustainably and to create employment. The current bill moves the regulatory system in the opposite direction. It increases costs, administrative obligations, and enforcement exposure, and there is no corresponding simplification. That's our contention. We therefore urge the department and the legislature to reconsider these provisions of the bill that increase employer burden. legislative reform should focus on simplifying existing compliance obligations, consolidating overlapping regulatory processes, and supporting the sustainability of small and medium-sized businesses. We employ thousands of people across manufacturing, retail, warehouse, logistics, and contracting. And the continued viability of these businesses is essential, not only for our sector, but for the broader construction, infrastructure, and maintenance economy of South Africa. We've asked for a regulatory framework that recognizes the realities faced by small and medium businesses. We remain willing to engage constructively, but we reaffirm our commitment to fair labor standards, decent work, and constitutional compliance. But at the same time, sustainable employment depends on regulatory balance. Legislation that increases cost risk and rigidity without corresponding flexibility and proportionality ultimately constrains job creation and formalization. And so one moves to an informal economy, one moves to outsourcing, one moves to capitalization of equipment as a labor replacement mechanism. And our contention is that's what the department is forcing us to do. Quickly, not slowly, quickly. And we're already seeing this amongst the membership of the Confederation. So the bill represents an opportunity to strengthen labor protection while preserving economic viability, provided its implementation is calibrated carefully and collaboratively. Colleagues, I need to know if there's disagreement with the nature of this feedback that we're actually preparing to submit both to the Department of Employment and Labor and also to BUSA. Is there anybody on the line who has an alternative view, or is there anybody on the line who would make who wants to make any kind of comment? So then I take it everybody is in agreement with our input. All right. Let me move to...
Ever,
Yes. Who is that?
you start again.
Yes, Thomas.
For this amendment bill, what they must do from the government side, they must have a way where all businesses in South Africa can get easy access to all compliances in all statutory of government SOEs. From CIBC, SARS, Department of Labor, and other places where business must be compliant. They must give us a place where we can say, if we knock the doors to them to say, we are here to do compliance, they must emphasize that. Because as businesses, if we are compliant, which means we are growing our economy of South Africa. Every company every company in South Africa is compliant, Ivan?
Yes.
If every company in South Africa is compliant, it's money that has been paid to government. It's money that has been put into the JSE of South Africa. So from the government side, they must also consider that and keep that in mind to say each and every business in South Africa, whether it's Department of Labor, it's SARS, it's CICP, it's NHBRC, it's CIDB, all those institutions, they must give us an easy access for us as business, as employers, to comply with them, to pay to them. And after that, they must give us the compliance document on time so that we can also be able to participate in the business that is happening in our country.
Tobo, thank you. I think you've made your point very, very clearly. And we will certainly emphasize that as additional series of paragraphs. I just want to ask, Abdullah, is there anything from your side, sir?
Sorry, if I was talking with it on mute. No, I actually agree with whatever you just spoke about, and I mean, it seems utterly ridiculous. And yeah, I mean, I'm in agreement with your
Thank you.
conclusions.
Thanks so much. Bernard, from your point of view?
Sorry, I couldn't find my unmute button. Yeah, good morning. No, very much in agreement with what you said, and we are certainly happy to co-sign whatever is prepared by you. It is ludicrous, the whole thing. I'm actually trying to find an interesting article that I picked up on a German newspaper, how New Zealand actually reverts certain labor legislation in order to strengthen the industry. I mean, what we have felt and seen over the last couple of years that the situation in South Africa is exactly the opposite, and we need to do everything in our power to rectify certain things. Because I mean, also with the advent of AI and job replacements, and I don't know why people work together with unions. I mean, I'm all for having laborers work in a safe and fair environment, but I mean, it's just going way over the top, and I certainly, if I can somehow avoid it, will not let them into our factory.
Thank you. Thanks so much for that input. I appreciate that. Thanks, Bernard. Dave, from your perspective, what are your thoughts in this regard, sir?
Yeah, look, I think everything you've raised and put it very eloquently and concisely, and I think it'll go a long way, and I don't disagree with your argument at all. You know, from our perspective, it's quite simple. Now, I think this is echoed across the industry. We're a wholly owned subsidiary of an overseas organization, and if it becomes too onerous, and I've already had these comments coming from our board, they simply close shop. And we get moved to India or South America or China. And you know, I've asked for capital expenditure on investments, and they said, why the hell should we in an environment like you? I don't see any growth in potential. I don't see any growth in profits. I don't see any advantage for us as a group at all. You're last on the list when it comes to that. And you know, I think that the unions, I mean, they had their place without a doubt back in the bad old days when people were being taken advantage of. Now they are simply a criminal organization. I hate to say it, but you know, I'm just seeing it more and more. And I think a question that I need to throw back at you, Ivor, as well, is, you know, we're all coming in from a SAPMA perspective. How do we get more muscle on this whole issue? You know, which other organizations do we rally and say, we need your support on this? You know, is it the construction industry? Is it metal workers? Is it retail? You know, because I'm pretty sure that these 10,000 labor inspectors will be visiting a lot of companies. And, you know, when they rock up with their union representative, we need to have clout and say, no, you will not dictate to us. You will not do this. And it seems to be the only kind of language is that they understand is direct resistance. And, you know, otherwise, it's a talk shop. So
Dave,
I don't know if there's any other organizations we can use.
I really appreciate your raising that point. And we are about to go through wage negotiations in the Bargaining Council. At the moment, only voluntary members of the Bargaining Council are covered by the agreements, but they're about to be extended by the same minister to cover non-parties, which means everybody in the room today. And I can tell you for a fact, we're making these points in those negotiations, exactly as you're making them, about the potential consequences of ridiculous increases or ridiculous demands. And some of you will have already seen what Tara's office sent out this morning from SAPMA in relation to the demands we've now received from the trade unions. We will be, opposing those demands vociferously. And very aggressively, because that's the only thing that seems to work. So, Dave, thank you so much for that. Namunda, from your perspective. Namunda, are you there? Hello. I see your microphone is off. I mean, on. Okay, for whatever reason, it's not. Kavir, can I ask you, do you have any comments, sir?
Yeah, no, thanks, Ivan. I think, again, just to echo what was said, very eloquently conveyed. Certainly agree with all the salient points. And yeah, look, it's certainly adding rigidity to an already rigid structure, which definitely doesn't. It just exacerbates the current situation and doesn't attract investment. There's a comment made about pulling away investment. I think it's certainly not aligned to growth. It certainly just adds to an already rigid structure, which has been in place for a long time. So, yeah, I fully agree with all your comments.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
All right, everybody, thank you so much. We will distribute the final paper that we do submit based on these discussions and based on what I've presented to you. I truly appreciate the fact that you've borne with us. And as we've said, when we run sessions like this, we try to keep within a 45-minute framework, and we've kept within that framework. So thank you all for being here and for participating with us. And watch this space. That's all I can say. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thanks, Ivan.
Thanks, Ivan.
you.
Goodbye.
Thanks, eh?
Cheers, Ivan.
Thank you. Cheers. Bye-bye. Bye.
Thanks, bye. Thanks, bye.